Alright, your fucking taste god is back, fuckers. And I just want to do this quick video about the Sega Saturn and why it failed. Because basically, I have a great subscriber. He's a cool dude. And his name is Franklin Clinton. And he basically made a comment on my PS2 video. Corey Margera, can you do a video on why the Sega Saturn failed? And I didn't really want to. But I was like, okay. But only if you watch it. Because I don't want to make this video and nobody fucking watches it. So, and I'm just gonna cut to the point. There ain't gonna be no filler. None of this corny shit. No, it's just gonna be the reason the Sega Saturn failed in the United States, because it didn't fail in Japan. It did not fail in Japan. It only failed really in America and Europe. But it actually did very, very well in Japan. Yeah, they had a lot of JRPGs on the system, a lot of arcade games that they didn't fucking port to the United States. And, that's pretty much... The reason the Sega Saturn failed is because Sega did a Shoshana. They did a Shoshana B. Roberts. Sega thought they were gangsta, and they thought that they had it popping because the Genesis was a great system. It was a big hit, especially in America and Europe. And they thought, hey, we can do whatever we want. We can launch the console at $400 at a time when inflation wasn't even relevant. $400 is still today a lot of money. Back then it was even worse because there was no inflation, so we didn't have minimum wage wasn't up. Minimum wage was like $5 an hour or some shit like that, and people didn't want to buy a fucking Sega Saturn. It was like, first of all, you have no Sonic games. You have no Sonic. You did a Shoshana B. Roberts. You just came out here with your natural ass, Sega, because you're stupid. And Sega Japan, who is stupid as well. They don't know that Europe, the fucking American market, so they need to just shut the fuck up. What Tom Kalinske, whatever his name is, the president of Sega in the early 90s with the Genesis, he was smart. He knew what he was doing. Alright, Sega Japan didn't know what the fuck they were doing. They only knew Japan. You motherfuckers do not know how to market shit in America. Shut up. Seriously. And this was a time where Japan was not, like, at that point yet. They weren't at that point where, like, anime was really popular. Japan was, like, taking over the world. This was, like, right before that point. So, Sega Japan just didn't know what they were doing. They only knew what they were doing in Japan. And then you had fucking Bernie Stoller, who's basically, a lot of people would call him like the Vince Russo of gaming, because he didn't know what the fuck he was doing. He thought he knew what the people wanted, and he didn't give a lot of the nerds what they wanted. He was the Vince Russo of gaming. Bernie Stoller was the Vince Russo of gaming, just like Joel Schumacher is the Vince Russo of Batman. But yeah, basically Bernie Stoller, he was like, oh, Americans don't want to play RPGs. Which, he was right. If he was talking about me, I didn't want to play no fucking RPGs. Unless it was old school Pokemon and Kingdom Hearts. I don't give a shit about that crap. But, basically, he didn't want any JRPGs in the West. No RPGs in America. None of that. He didn't really want Lunar and all this other shit. All this Final Fantasy stuff. He was like, yeah, nah, I don't think it's going to do well in this. And, basically, he fucked up Sega. And he was stupid, too. Because he basically announced like 3 years early, like, oh, the Saturn isn't our future in 1998, before the Dreamcast had even come out in America. And the Saturn is the real reason why Sega failed. People would have blamed like the Sega CD and the 32X. No one gave a shit about the 32X or the Sega CD back then. I knew no one who had it. So no one, yeah, they were failures. But I mean, if you're going to call the 32X and the Sega CD a failure, you have to call the Virtual Boy a failure. The Virtual Boy by Nintendo, that was a failure. Alright? Sega could have afforded to, like, screw up and come out with shitty consoles, like when they were having a successful run with the Sega Genesis. Or the Mega Drive, if you're out of the United States and you call it a different name. But yeah, because they were on top of the world. And they were, you stupid, they thought they could get cocky and arrogant. They thought they could do a fucking Shoshana. They thought that they could be gangsta and get it popping and just release all kinds of consoles that didn't make no sense. The Pico. I knew people who had a Pico too. I actually have a neighbor who used to have a Pico when she was really young. She was like a baby. But yeah, I mean, the Sega just got out of control, and the Saturn is actually, look at the Saturn. The Sega Saturn is a really cool, badass looking system. I mean, you just look at the Sega Saturn, and it's like, wow, this system looks cool. And it's like, how the fuck could a cool system, a cool looking system with one of the best controllers ever, this Sega Saturn controller in the picture right here, this is a very comfortable, badass controller. Because I played Street Fighter versus X-Men with this controller. It is the best. This controller is the best. I miss control. See, Sega should have just stuck with this controller when they made the Dreamcast. Because the Dreamcast controller is okay, but it is not as good as it. This is the best Sega controller ever. The best Sega controller ever. Better than the Genesis, better than the Dreamcast. And I don't even like the Saturn. The Saturn's not even that great. It doesn't even have that many good games, especially here in America. You gotta import shit. So it's like, damn, you might as well just get a Japanese Saturn. You might as well get one of those silver Sega Saturns from Japan and just buy all the RPGs and all the other shit that came out over there. Because they ain't come out with shit over here. They ain't come out with nothing. But I guarantee you, though, if the Sony PlayStation didn't come out, this system would not have been a failure. It would not have been a failure. All those games for the PlayStation, like Tomb Raider and Resident Evil, they would have came out for the Sega Saturn anyway. Quake would have came out for the Sega Saturn. So these games would have came out for the Sega Saturn anyway. The industry would have matured regardless. That's why I say to people, for all you people that give Sony so much fucking credit, and say that if Sony didn't exist and come into the video game market, that if the PlayStation 1 didn't exist, the gaming would be obsolete. There would have been another crash. Bullshit. Sega and Nintendo would have prevented that. Sega and Nintendo knew what they were fucking doing. Sega, obviously, they made some stupid decisions, like not launching a console, a Sega console without a Sonic game. Made no sense. Yuji Naka was actually working on Sonic Extreme, and they were dumb, and they kept changing it because Sega of America to Sega Japan couldn't agree on one fucking plot for the game. So because they were fucking stupid. They were fucking stupid. You know, and Yuji Naka, he basically like threw his hands up. He was sick of it. And I don't blame him. Because it was bullshit. A lot of bullshit that went on. A lot of politics that went on behind the scenes. You know, but how are you going to have a Sega console launch with no Sonic game? At a time where, you know, the Sega Saturn launched at a time where Sonic was really, really fucking hot. He was like the NWO. He was like Call of Duty or GTA or something. He was real hot. He was like the shit. And he was like, you're not going to launch a Sega console with no Sonic game? Made no sense. And you launch it at $400 at a time where minimum wage was still only like $5 an hour. And we're pissed off. We want minimum wage to go up nowadays. So how the hell are you gonna, like, literally, you got motherfuckers who are like in teenage years, high school, college, who want to buy a video game console and they can't afford it, and you have no fucking games on it. Only game they launched really was with Virtua Fighter and a few racing games. That's it. And you ask why the Sega Saturn failed in America? Are you kidding? It didn't have shit. It didn't have shit. It had no good games on it. It had nothing. It had like a few good games that you could get on the PlayStation. Like literally. And the PlayStation was cheaper. And yeah, I do think that the gaming industry would be better if it was just the Sega Saturn and the N64. Because the PlayStation brought too much casual shit to gaming that did not need to be in there. Alright, Parappa the Rapper, motherfucker, are you serious? That did not need to be in the gaming industry. That did not. All you faggots that think that Parappa the Rapper was your childhood and it was a great game, go fuck yourself, you faggots. You got shit taste. Your taste is complete and utter shit. It's terrible. Oh, God. You're nasty. You got cooties. You have cooties. You have bad taste cooties. You think that Parappa the Rapper was a good game, you're faggots. But yeah, this is obvious why the Sega Saturn failed. It was competing against the PlayStation and the N64, and it came out at $400. You know, in the 90s, not like today. In the 90s, it came out at $400 before inflation really took off. There was no Sonic game. The only good games I could really think of for the Saturn were the original House of the Dead. There was this really cool beat 'em up, Guardian Heroes. That was a really cool game. And of course, like the 2D fighting games were better on the Saturn because the Saturn was programmed to be a more 2D capable machine, a 2D capable console. So, 2D games came out looking really good on the Saturn compared to the PlayStation and the N64 because those consoles were designed to be 3D machines that could push polygons and stuff. So the Sega Saturn, in my opinion, I kind of wish the Sega Saturn did not fail in a way because, one, it was just this controller. And there's a lot of people that say, oh, the Saturn. I remember watching an episode of Icons on G4 Tech TV back when they used to actually show good video game shit. There was this one guy. He basically, I think his name was Stephen Kent, if I'm not mistaken. And he was basically bashing the Sega Saturn controller and saying the Dreamcast had a better controller. Felt like a game machine compared to like the Sega Saturn's kidney bean shaped controller. And I was like, are you serious? I watched the episode, and if you people watch episodes, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, just Google G4 Icons the Dreamcast episode, and then you'll see. But yeah, I thought that was ridiculous because the Sega Saturn controller was perfect. That was like the best controller, aside from, in my opinion, next to the DualShock, the Sony PlayStation DualShock controllers, the first two. Not so much the PS3 DualShock because I hate the triggers on that thing. But the DualShock for the PS1 and the PS2, the DualShock 2, those were great fucking controllers. Those are great controllers. And then this was a great controller right here, the Sega Saturn controller. But but that's basically why it failed, because Sega was stupid. They launched the console, it was too expensive. They had no good games aside from a Virtual Fighter and some fucking racing games. That's it. Yeah, it did have Tomb Raider. It did have like Resident Evil and stuff like that, but those were games you could get on the PlayStation. The PlayStation was a cheaper console. So what were you going to do? But granted, if the PS1 did not exist, the Sega Saturn would have been a success. They eventually would have dropped the price, and there would have been a whole bunch of Sega fans who hated Nintendo who would have bought the Sega Saturn instead of the PlayStation. So for all you people that say the gaming industry would have crashed without Sony and without the original PlayStation, go fuck yourself, because you don't know what you're talking about. You do not know what you are talking about. All these great games that the PS1 had, minus the Sony exclusives, which were not that great to begin with. Sony cannot make good games. Alright? Aside from Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica and David Jaffe and all those people, Sony cannot make good games. Just admit it. They don't make good games. Infamous is okay at best. Killzone is a fucking wannabe Halo. Alright? All these Uncharted sucks. Uncharted is overhyped. Twisted Metal, I could live without. And David Jaffe most likely would have made the game anyway. Because David Jaffe used to make games he made Mickey Mania for the SNES and the Sega Genesis. It was one of the first games he ever made. It was by Sony ImageSoft. So hey, if worst came to worst, Sony would have stayed a third-party developer. They would have stayed Sony ImageSoft, or they may have changed their name to Sony Computer Entertainment, but they still would have made games for the N64 and the Sega Saturn. So the industry would have been fine. You would have got a Twisted Metal for the N64 and the Sega Saturn anyway. So for all you people bitching and saying like, oh, if it wasn't for Sony, the business would be dead. No, it wouldn't. It would still be great. The Saturn would have been a success. The Dreamcast would have been better than what it was, because it probably would have kept the Sega Saturn controller. Probably most likely would have been backwards compatible. And that was actually one thing that Japan got right, because the Sega Saturn was a big hit in Japan. It was just as popular as the PS1. So they were basically, Sega Japan wanted it to be backwards, the Sega Dreamcast to be backwards compatible with the Saturn. And the American didn't want that. Sega of America didn't want that because the Saturn was not a big hit over here. And I'm basically saying, it might as well have been a backwards compatible machine. Might as well just be backwards compatible with Sega Saturn games. Because what the fuck, you might as well. I mean, unless that made the console like more expensive to make. But you might as well, because there were some pretty decent games on the Saturn, but nothing like must-have worthy. It was no... I mean, yeah, you had Knights, you had Panzer Dragoon, you had Virtual Fighter and stuff like that. But aside from that, Sega didn't have anything. All right, there was no, and again, there was no Streets of Rage on the Sega Saturn, no Streets of Rage 4. Did we even have a good Shinobi game for the Sega Saturn? Did we even have a good Vector Man game for the Sega Saturn? So forget, Sonic aside, there was no other great Sega games for the Sega Saturn, aside from Virtual Fighter and a few other games, Panzer Dragoon, Knights, and stuff like that. So that's why it failed. Because Sega of America, Sega in general, did a Shoshana. They did a Shoshana B. Roberts, and they thought they were gangster, and they thought that they got it popping. They thought they had a big ass. Thought they had big tits, and they thought they could just do whatever the fuck they want. That's why they failed, because they're stupid. They were stupid, and that's just my thing. But it would have been successful eventually, because look at the PS3. PS3 launched for $600, had no games at launch, except for Resistance. Had no Gran Turismo, no God of War on the PS3 at launch. And look at that system. It ended up outselling the Xbox 360 worldwide later on. So it's like, the Sega Saturn would have been a success regardless. It would have been just Sega and Nintendo like the good old days when gaming was what it was. Instead of all this multimedia bullshit, all this downloadable content, all this DRM, and all this overrating of online gaming. But yeah, that's just my take on it. Sega did a Shoshana B. Roberts. They thought they were gangster. They thought that they had a big ass, big hips, and they thought they could get away with shit. And they probably would if it wasn't for the PlayStation. And that's why the Sega Saturn failed. End of story. All right, that's it. I'm done.